Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. One of the early champions of the abolition of slavery was a Virginian. His name was Edward Coles. He was born in 1786 and hailed from one of Virginia's finest families, who happened to be neighbors of Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe. While a student at William and Mary College, Coles was exposed to the idea that slavery was a moral wrong and a political and legal problem without a clear path to solution. In 1808, upon the death of his father, Coles inherited land and a dozen enslaved people. By this time, the seeds of abolition had been planted and taken root in his mind and his thinking. 2 years later, he went to work as a private secretary to President James Madison. During his service with Madison, Coles wrote a letter to former President Thomas Jefferson. That letter is dated July 31st, 1814. It's an auspicious moment in our nation's history. The country was embroiled in a war with Great Britain, and only weeks later, the British Army invaded Washington, D.C., burning the White House and the unfinished Capitol building. Coles's letter is a request to the now elder statesman Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, a strong supporter of the rights of mankind, of humankind. The letter that Coles wrote is worthy of hearing in its entirety. So here we go. Washington, D.C., July 31st, 1814. Dear Sir, I never took up my pen with more hesitation or felt more embarrassment than I do now in addressing you on the subject of this letter. The fear of appearing presumptuous distresses me and would deter me from venturing thus to call your attention to a subject of such magnitude and so beset with difficulties as that of a general emancipation of the slaves of Virginia. Had I not the highest opinion of your goodness and liberality in not only excusing me for the liberty I take, but in justly appreciating my motives in doing so. I will not enter on the right which man has to enslave his brother man, nor upon the moral and political effects of slavery on individuals or on society, because these things are better understood by you than by me. My object is to entreat and beseech you to exert your knowledge and influence in devising and getting into operation some plan for the gradual emancipation of slavery. This difficult task could be less exceptionably and more successfully performed by the revered fathers of all our political and social blessings than by any succeeding statesman, and would seem to come with peculiar propriety and force from those whose valor, wisdom, and virtue have done so much in ameliorating the condition of mankind. And it is a duty, as I conceive, that devolves particularly on you from your known philosophical and enlarged view of subjects, and from the principles you have professed and practiced through a long and useful life, preeminently distinguished as well by being foremost in establishing on the broadest basis the rights of man and the liberty and independence of your country, as in being throughout honored with the most important trusts by your fellow citizens, whose confidence and love you have carried with you into the shades of old age and retirement. In the calm of this retirement, you might, most beneficially to society, and with much addition to your own fame, avail yourself of that love and confidence to put into complete practice those hallowed principles contained in that renowned declaration of which you were the immortal author and on which bottomed our right to resist oppression and establish our freedom and independence. I hope that the fear of failing at this time will have no influence in preventing you from employing your pen to eradicate this most degrading feature of British colonial policy, which is still permitted to exist, notwithstanding its repugnance as well to the principles of our revolution as to our free institutions. For however highly prized and influential your opinions may now be, they will be still much more so when you shall have been snatched from us by the course of nature. If therefore your attempt should now fail to rectify this unfortunate evil, an evil most injurious both to the oppressed and to the oppressor, at some future day when your memory will be consecrated by a grateful posterity, what influence, irresistible influence, will the opinions and writings of Thomas Jefferson have on all questions connected with the rights of man and of that policy which will be the creed of your disciples? Permit me then, my dear sir, again to entreat you to exert your great powers of mind and influence, and to employ some of your present leisure in devising a mode to liberate one half of our fellow beings from an ignominious bondage to the other, either by making an immediate attempt to put in train a plan to commence this goodly work, or to leave human nature the invaluable testament which you are so capable of doing, how best to establish its rights, so that the weight of your opinion may be on the side of emancipation when that question shall be agitated, and that it will be sooner or later is most certain. That it may soon is my most ardent prayer, that it will be rests with you. I will only add, as an excuse for the liberty I take in addressing you on the subject, which is so particularly interesting to me, that from the time I was capable of reflecting on the nature of political society and of the rights appertaining to man, I have not only been principled against slavery, but have had feelings so repugnant to it as to decide me not to hold them, which decision has forced me to leave my native state, and with it all my relations and friends. This, I hope, will be deemed by you some excuse for the liberty of this intrusion, of which I gladly avail myself to assure you of the very great respect and esteem with which I am, my dear sir, your very sincere and devoted friend, Edward Coles. Wow. What a letter written by a young man who was possessed of the idea of the abolition of slavery, leaving behind all that he knew in his home state of Virginia to write his fellow Virginian and the elder statesman, Thomas Jefferson. You may be wondering if Jefferson replied. He did, and it's a rather long response, so I'll share it on the next video. But you may also be wondering what became of Coles. He eventually moved to Illinois, bringing his slaves with him, and there he freed all of them. Coles went on to be the second governor of Illinois. He played a critical role in ending slavery in the state, and he lived a long life. He lived to see the Civil War and his national dreams of the abolition of slavery, the end of slavery realized. However, those dreams of abolition cost him dearly. His son, Robert Coles, moved from his birthplace in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Virginia in 1860. Young Coles became a slave owner. He joined the Confederate Army when the war began, much to the objections of his father, Edward. And young Coles was killed in action at the Battle of Roanoke Island, North Carolina, on February 8th, 1862. The Confederate captain's remains rest in a Philadelphia cemetery with his father, who died there in 1868, and other family members. So thanks for listening to the story of Edward Coles, his 1814 letter to Thomas Jefferson, pleading with Jefferson to use his powers of writing, his powers of thinking, his powers as the elder statesman, the author of the Declaration of Independence, former president, bring his weight to bear and do something about slavery now, or write something so that future generations of Americans could help guide them when the time would come, and surely it would, to end slavery. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.